when I started on this journey, I was $80,000 in debt with no job, and we lived on the welfare, and we just had nothing for years. I just never gave up, and my wife never gave up on me.
Welcome to Wild Muse, a healing, artistic space for creative souls. And today I'm joined by Suntara, one of Australia's leading sound healers and breathworkers, who apprenticed with the founder of Rebirthing Breathwork, Leonard Orr. Suntara means bringing light to the earth. I just love that. And really, that is Suntara's sole intention with his music, his events, and his trainings. I wanted to start with your soul intention because to me, that feels like a really good jumping off point, because I know from attending one of your events in Bali and hearing your story, which places you about 16 years ago working as an IT consultant, I was like, I wonder if his intention 16 years ago when he was working in an office in London was to bring light to the earth. And so I'm really curious at how we can go on this journey of, like, firstly, playing along with convention, getting the job that we think that we're supposed to get, and then slowly, gradually find what we've actually come here in this lifetime to do. So how did you know that you had another calling other than being an IT consultant?
Well, I didn't really know. I just knew that I couldn't do the office anymore. I knew that I couldn't do that. I mean, I knew that I could sing, and I knew that I was a natural musician, but I didn't know that I could make a life and a living out of it. Actually, I thought that was impossible at that stage, because everyone had told me, you're too old. Like, I was 30 when I started. I was 30 doing IT. I had an ex-girlfriend who told me, you're too old. Everyone's like, you got to make it in music when you're in your late teens, early 20s, or that's it. And I had to shatter that belief. So I didn't know. And but what I did know is that I had to stop, and I had to get out of the corporate world. And I just had to follow this crazy path that I didn't even know was a path at the beginning.
Yeah, that really resonates, this idea of there is a path, but at the beginning, we don't know what it is. And often people have told us, that path isn't possible, that path doesn't exist. And do you think, because you were like, I had to get out, do you think it's the pain of the life, the incorrect life that we've chosen has to become so intense for us to kind of get that impulse to make the change?
Yeah, I literally couldn't be in the office anymore. I mean, in 2006, I had signed up for a 6-month contract at an investment bank in Canary Wharf. And I had just been traveling for a whole year in South America, solo travel. And so I went from the jungle to the concrete jungle within 1 week. And I got in that office and my soul was just like, no, sorry, we're not going to do this anymore. And I was like, well, I signed up for 6 months. I got to fulfill my commitment. But I knew that was the last time, and all I had to do was get through that 6 months. But I needed help to get through that 6 months. And, I'll go into the story if you like. I was in that office job in 2006 knowing it was the last time. The first thing I did was I told my boss I was only going to do 4 days a week so I could get 3 days to just relax and unwind, de-stress. But I knew that I needed something else, and I wasn't going to take antidepressants or anti-anxiety because I don't like pharmaceuticals at all. But I know that I just intrinsically know that there's always something for us that is our medicine. And so I kind of put it out there to the universe and said, I really need something here that can help me. And as soon as I put that prayer out to the universe saying I need something to help me, I thought about singing, because singing has always been what makes me happy ever since I was a little boy. And so I had a singing teacher in London, Heather Meyer Thomas, amazing singing teacher. But I'd lost contact with her, so I hadn't been for lessons for a few years. So I was just looking for her on the internet, trying to find her phone number so I could call her and get some lessons. And I put in what I thought was her website, and up came someone else's website, a man called Alexander Massey, who I also knew him. I got the websites mixed up. And I just saw on Alexander's website that he was running a workshop, and the workshop was called Dream Sounding. And the description of the workshop was he was going to sing over our bodies with his tenor opera voice, professional opera voice, for an hour and a half in a therapeutic setting. And when I read that, I just thought, that's it. I just know that's going to help me. I know that that's it. I know that that's my medicine. And so I went to his session, and I just lay down, and he came out, and he did that. He sang over us with his professional opera voice for an hour and a half, used a shamanic drum, used other instruments as well. But I got so cleared out, all of my stress of being in London just alleviated, evaporated, and dissolved. And I was able to go to the office the next day after that session, and I was okay. And I wasn't trying to leave every hour to get outside and regulate my nervous system through breath work or whatever I could find, sit with a tree, whatever, because the sound healing had regulated my nervous system in a big way. And had calmed the farm, so to speak. And actually the effects were long lasting. They lasted about a week, 2 weeks. I was even able to ride the tube without anxiety, which was pretty cool. Pretty hard to ride peak hour tube without having some sort of anxiety, I think. It's just so unnatural. Yeah. So I just kept going to his sessions, and every time I went, I got 2 weeks of peace. And so my medicine that actually helped me to get through my last 6 months as a computer programmer was ultimately what I ended up devoting my life to.
This exact thing, Suntara, is what I'm completely fascinated, because you said earlier you had that moment you could have gone on prescription medication. And that is the path that a lot of people choose because they don't necessarily know that there are opera singers offering you the chance to sing over your body, you know? And this amazing idea that when we do seek an alternative modality, it often wakes up the gift within ourselves. And I think it's the fact that we're not using that gift that causes the depression in the first place.
Spot on. Absolutely. Yeah.
And interestingly, you had all of those people, you know, you said that you wanted to be a musician, but you had people say, you know, you're too old. Because again, they didn't know that you had this vocal medicine inside you that had to be unleashed.
They didn't know, and I didn't know. And when I went to those sessions with Alexander, I still didn't know.
So when did you start? I mean, you were saying, okay, I couldn't do the office job. So first first step, I know that I can't do what I'm currently doing. And I think there are going to be a lot of people that can resonate with that. I'm stuck in an office. It was a bigger contrast because you'd been in the jungle and you were now, as you said, in this concrete jungle. So number one, you realize I can't do what I'm currently doing. Number two, you take a step to alleviate your pain through a sort of alternative, possibly spiritual route. So when did you start to get ideas about what you could do and that perhaps you had a similar gift inside you?
Well, one of the workshops that Alexander did, it's actually the second one that I went to. It was called Sounding for Others. So we immediately got a chance to use our voices, and I realized I could tone, I could chant, but back then it was very basic what I was doing. So I had an opportunity to share in that environment and use my voice over other people's bodies, and I saw what effect that had. So I was able to do that, and then, Alexander stopped coming to London after a while, and I ended up going to his house as well for a one-on-one, and he did a session on me which was really profound, just a one-on-one. And when he finished, I said to him, "Can I give you a session?" I don't know, something inside me just said, do it, do a session. And him as the teacher was sort of a bit taken aback. What? And but he humbly agreed to allow me to sing over his body. And he got off the mat and said to me, "Wow, worked for me too." So that was the beginning of that.
I mean, there's a certain amount of trust too. The trust of saying to your boss, "I'm only going to do 4 days a week." There's a certain amount of listening, like, this is what I feel to do. I feel right now to offer my teacher a session. I'm curious also, I remember when I first started my shamanic training, and I went on this whole shamanic training course because I wanted to heal myself. I didn't go to become a shamanic practitioner, or at least that was what I thought. And I remember the way each of the modules are set up is that you spend the first 4 days of the in residence training doing your own healing work, and then the second set of 4 days learning certain healing techniques. And it's that beautiful premise, which is you've got to do your own work before you can help other people. So when we started the first 4 days of learning the techniques, I was just like, oh, well, I'll listen and I'll take notes, but I'm not going to be able to do any of this stuff. And I remember when I did the very first practice session, I felt like every part of me that had been itchy up until that point had just got a good scratch. It was just this perfect combination of focus, creativity, love. I was like, oh my God, I'm using everything within me that I've wanted to use all at once. And so I'm curious, what did you first experience when you first got to use your gifts, or you got to use your body or yourself or your soul in a way that you hadn't up until that point?
Yeah, for me, like, the beginning was quite low key. It wasn't sort of like, oh wow, I'm finally going to get to do this. It was more like just childlike curiosity, and I still at that point had no thought of that being like a career. It was like, oh, maybe I can do this. It feels good to chant over people. It feels good to be chanted over. I like this. I'm going to do it a bit, I think. But it wasn't like, at that point, oh my God, like I've been waiting my whole life for this. It was like there was so much uncertainty.
Mm.
There was just so much, like, there was so much uncertainty. I didn't know what I was going to do. You know, I knew it was my last contract.
Mm.
I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I was very passionate about natural therapies in general at that point. I had been reading so many books on natural therapies, and I'd been reading so many books on natural cures for cancer, and I'd read about all the clinics in Mexico and places where they were curing cancer, and reading about Gerson and Hoxie and Hulda Clark and, you know, all these things. I was very passionate about natural cures in general. So, but I would say back then I was thinking I'm going to go study and be a naturopath or a kinesiologist. Actually, I was studying kinesiology. I thought I was going to be a muscle tester. So I was really in this exploratory phase and I was exploring things like Reiki and getting excited about that, and, you know, touch for health and kinesiology, as I said. And, you know, I was around, what was I? I was 20, to 30. So Saturn return right in this time of exploration. So,
And it sounds like you must have had a certain amount of ability to hold yourself in that place of discomfort, because I think often what can be the challenge when we're leaving that sort of regular career is the uncertainty. But you sort of said, no, there was this kind of childlike curiosity, because I think listening to you, when I first started doing alternative trainings, at that point, I was very afraid of uncertainty. So I would make these decisions of like, right, I'm going to go all in. That session felt incredible. I've scratched all my itches. Right, I'm going to be a shamanic practitioner. I'm going to make it work, because I needed that certainty. But it sounds like you were just happy to explore and see how it all turned out.
I still live with tons of uncertainty on a day-to-day basis. I mean, let me just sort of elaborate the story a little so you can hear a little bit more of the journey. So through that time in London, when I was going to see Alexander for those sessions, I actually went to Scotland during that time as well. And I went to the Findhorn Foundation, which is, like, for those of people who don't know, you should look it up, findhorn.org, and read the story of Findhorn. It's really amazing. Basically, it's a sustainable community that started in the 60s and flourished over the years. But I was told by a psychic, you should go to Findhorn. So a year and a half after I had that psychic reading, when I was in London doing all this, I went. And when I went to Findhorn, I was on Experience Week, where you get to plant trees and work in the gardens and really just experience life at Findhorn. It's amazing. I was there with 25 people from around the world, and one of the people in the training was this beautiful and lovely, very lovely young lady from Venezuela. And we had a connection, real connection. I spoke some Spanish, and so I said hola to her, and we started chatting, and we really had a connection, so much in common. And we spent that week at Findhorn getting to know each other. And when we finished the week at Findhorn, she was going back to London because she worked in London, and I worked in London too, so that was cool. And I said to her as we were going back to London, I said, I'll call you when we get back to London. I'd love to see you again. And she said, great. And but when we got back to London, this voice got in. And the voice was saying, oh, she's so beautiful, man. She's too good for you. And it was saying, she's from Venezuela. Her life's here in London. You want to go back to Australia. Don't go starting any long distance thing. That would be silly. And so that voice was very loud, and it won. And so I didn't call her. I just dropped it. Basically I ghosted her. And many months went by, and I was still being an idiot, listening to those voices. And it was that's when I went to Oxford to see Alexander, because he wasn't coming to London anymore. I went for a private session, and I did that private session with Alexander. And after that session, I felt so so blissed out and so clear, so much space in the mind, so little chatter. And that little voice that was telling me, don't do it, it was gone in that moment. And then there was just this overwhelming urge to, what are you waiting for? Like, just take it one day at a time. And so I left Alexander's house and I went to the train station to go back to London. And I pulled out my phone and I called her. And she answered the phone. I had ghosted her for 2.5 months, and she wasn't angry. She was excited to hear from me, which was nice. She understood that I had a few things I needed to work out internally. And we've been married for how long now? 2007. 17 years this year is our 17th anniversary, and just the most amazing marriage, amazing love, deep love, like lifelong connection. So we got together in London, and then we went on a massive adventure after adventure for 17 years. And one of the reasons that I can live in uncertainty, and like, we need another podcast for some of the stories I could tell you about. Like, oh man. When I started on this journey with sound healing, we were $80,000 in debt, and I didn't have a job, and we had twin newborns. That's uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I didn't get a job.
Yeah, Suntara, I mean, from reading your website, I've heard a little bit about this story. What's so brilliant about your journey is that it's incredibly inspiring. Like, there's that story where you were busking because literally your credit cards were maxed out and you had zero money to buy food, and you made $19 that day when you were busking and you were able to buy food. For me, that's a really beautiful story because it shows people the commitment that you had to not go back into the tech world, to figure out a way to find your way through. And I've been really reflecting on that. And I think you've already given the people who are listening to this, watching this, an idea of how that was possible, because the medicine of sound, the medicine of breath, if it takes away or if it clears the mind of those negative voices, whether it's for a fortnight, whether it's even for just an hour, you get that other glimpse into who you truly are and what the world truly is, aside from what your fear is telling you. And I think it enables you to be in those uncertain times. I certainly have experienced that myself. I've been I've woken up in the morning and I'm utterly terrified. I think everything's going to fail. And then I lie down and I breathe for 55 minutes and I sit up thinking, I'm a vessel of the divine. What was I thinking? There's nothing to worry about.
Yeah. It's powerful. It's powerful medicine. It's more powerful than the pills.
Oh, yeah.
In my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious because I know I spoke to your wife, Razami, after the event that I attended in Bali, and we had a very brief chat about breathwork. And she said to me, "Oh, you've got to ask Suntara about his rebirthing breathwork experience." So maybe you've got many, but I'm curious to hear what was that? How did you were having the sound healing, you were having the opera singers sing over you. At what point did you then discover breathwork?
So breathwork came earlier. So breathwork came the year before. Actually, breathwork came a lot earlier. So basically, I read about breathwork. I read about holotropic breathwork in a book called The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. And I thought to myself, I really want to try this on myself. So this was like 2002. This was 4 years before I was in London that time. And so I was traveling in South America also at that time, but I went home to Sydney to start my studies in natural therapies. And I went to this amazing college in Sydney and called Nature Care. It's an alternative therapies college. And I picked up a copy of a holistic magazine and I opened it up to a random page. And the random page said, rebirthing. And so I went, oh, let's go. And so I went to this information evening with this guy, and he immediately signed up for 3 sessions with this guy. And I went along to the sessions, and little did I know, but it wasn't actually rebirthing. It was open mouth cathartic breathwork. And so there was a massive amount of screaming. Like I screamed so much in those sessions, it was traumatic. I mean, I had a massive catharsis, but at the same time, I really, it was too much for me. But I was young and I didn't really care. I just knew that it was cool. And so the guy that I was doing sessions with in Sydney, he said to me, you should do my training. I got a year-long training. You should study with me. You'd be really good at this. And I said, yeah, you betcha. I'm gonna study with you. And so my girlfriend at the time, she said to me, don't do it. He's not right for you. Because she was having sessions with him too, and she was a pretty switched on young lady. And my dad, who's very open-minded and into natural therapy since I was a little boy, he was like, you know, I'm into this stuff. You know, I like this stuff, but this does not feel right. And I was like, girlfriend's saying it, dad's saying it, but fuck it, I'm doing it. So I signed up for this year-long training with this guy, but I had to pay for it. And it was back in the day where bank checks were something that you did. You know, you got a bank check from the bank and sent it on the post. So I went to the bank to get a bank check to pay for this training. And the bank teller was a woman that I knew from working at a casual job as a teenager. She was my manager, Danielle was her name. And we're catching up. And she's like, what's this for? And I said, I'm going to do this breathwork training and change my life. And she's like, oh, that's nice. And anyway, so I get this check and I go to the post office and I sent the check to this guy, and that was it. I was on this training for a year, doing cathartic breathwork twice a week for a year with a bunch of people. And then I got a phone call from the bank. Danielle, the bank teller, knew my mother. So she got my number and she called me on my mobile phone and she said, Daniel, that check that I just drew you, I got distracted and I forgot to sign it. So she forgot to sign the check and I went, oh, okay. There, yeah, that's a sign. So I called the guy and I said, hey man, I sent you an unsigned check. So that means that I'm not going to be doing your training. And he said, well, this is a business and you're a loser if you pull out now. And I
Wow.
went, okay, well, I see your true colors shining
Mm.
through. And that's why I'm not doing your training. So that was cancelled by the universe.
Yeah.
And here's the banger.
Mm-hmm.
2 years later, the cancer clinics I was talking about earlier on in the interview, I went to Mexico to visit the cancer clinics because I wanted to know what the cancer clinics were doing. I didn't have cancer, but if you're hearing that cancer's curable, I'm just a seeker. I'm like, these guys are curing cancer. I want to know what they're doing. Like, why wouldn't you want to know?
Yeah.
So I went to San Diego and I found a woman who took people on tours to the best places. And I went to 6 different places that they're the real deal. These are the ones that have been there for 30 years. They work. So I went to 6 different places with this woman and I asked them all, can I volunteer? Can I stay here and talk to your clients? Can I look at the MRIs? And they all said no, except for one place. And this one place called the Hoxie Clinic, they said yes. And the amazing Mexican medical doctors, because they're all medical doctors, they welcomed me in to this clinic to stay and hang around for a week, talk to clients, talk to people who'd been cured there and all that, look at MRIs, hang out with the doctors, talk about alternative therapies. It was really wonderful. But the first day that I was at that clinic, the woman who ran the clinic, she said, there's a gentleman coming to the clinic today who I think you'd really like to meet. And he's from the United States. And so I said, okay, great. And I sat down and this gentleman in his 60s walks in and sits down and we're having a chat. And he said to me, what are you doing? I said, I'm going around the world, going to places that cure cancer. What are you doing? Oh, I've got a bit of skin cancer, just here to treat it. He said to me, but what do you do? I said, oh, I'm interested in energetic healing. I'm a polarity therapist because back then I was a body worker. And he said, have you ever heard of something called rebirthing breathwork? And I said, yeah, I did 3 sessions of the other style a couple of years ago, almost trained with this guy in Sydney. Believe it? And he said, well, you might know who I am. And it was Leonard Orr.
Mm. I'm tearing up.
Me too. And I've told that
Yeah.
story 100 million times.
Mm.
Full goosies, full tears.
Mm.
One of those moments where the universe said, hey, you're not doing this. You just let go and let us take you on this journey. And Leonard said to me, he said, in 2 weeks from now, I'm running a training in California that I haven't run since the 70s. It's called Return to the Sacred. It's a 9-day professional rebirthing breathwork training. And I said, well, of course I'm coming. And so, the universe had saved me from an absolute cowboy because breathwork, that's just why I'm so passionate about gentle breathwork. I actually am the founder of Yin Breathwork with my wife, Rasadami, because I truly believe that the gentleness is where the power is. Like, none of this heavy breathing catharsis. There's another way that doesn't involve hurting you or having a room full of people screaming. That's not a safe place. I'm sorry, but if someone's listening to this thinking, yes, it is. No, it's not. And, where is the spirit of gentleness in breathwork? That's my question. So I am so grateful that I met Leonard, because not only did I meet Leonard, I met him when he was 68 years old. Leonard Orr teaching breathwork when he was 68 is very different to Leonard Orr's teaching breathwork when he was 38 or 48, because he had got gentler and gentler and gentler. He'd taken it out of the water. He'd taken away the snorkels, and he was always saying to us, work on your gentleness. Work on your gentleness was his words that resonate and reverberate through my soul to this very day. Work on your gentleness, because the world needs gentleness. People need gentleness. People have been abused. They've been yelled at. They've been, we have to treat people in a breathwork situation with so much care and so much reverence, because they've had enough shit. They don't need us giving them more shit and more trauma through the process. Anyway, I'm a bit passionate about this. So that's my story. Yeah, I met Leonard.
I've got to try to speak, because I just wanted to let the tears come down my face. I've got a question for you, Suntara, because I am 100% with you with this call for gentleness, and it's certainly the way that I've come to work, bringing the threads of what I do together. And I will also say that, breathwork changed everything for me. It really did create a shift that I hadn't been able to create before. I had probably 2 or 3 quite intense breathwork sessions before I then found a more gentle breathwork. Before I'd had those intense breathwork sessions, I had been meditating and watching my breath and having a very gentle practice. But I really, really struggled. And then when I had those 3 more intense breathwork sessions, something shifted and enabled me to be gentle with myself. Up until that point, I'd been trying to be gentle, but I wasn't. And then weirdly, when I had those quite active breathwork sessions, I stepped into a place of profound love. And only then was I able to understand that's how I can love myself. And then I was able to be gentle. So I'm sort of a little bit conflicted, because I know that I've been able to come to gentle love as a result of having 2 or 3 very active sessions. But I would say they weren't cathartic for me because I wasn't screaming. But what happened was I was just lying there. My body was fizzing. Absolutely fizzing. And I saw 3 times, I saw this eye looking at me, and I was like, oh, that's the eye of love, and it's just looking at me, and now I know what love is. So, I'd love to know your thoughts on that, because I would have to put my hand up and say I have had cathartic sessions and they really helped, but I wouldn't choose to have them anymore. I would always choose gentle.
Yeah. What I want to say is that it's the application of the technique that's gentle. Okay. So with yin breathwork, or rebirthing as taught by Leonard in his later years, people still have massive, I call them internal catharsis, where shaking but this is where, what I want to say is there's so much beyond the scream. Like if we're going for the scream, that's what I'm talking about. As like, so many times I have someone who's screaming in a session, I'll say, come back to the breath. And they go through and they end up having a body release instead. When you have the unconscious catharsis instead of the conscious catharsis, it's so much better. So it sounds like what you had was that unconscious catharsis. Anyway, so in the gentle style, it's the application of it that's gentle. But the activation that happens can be massive body release and shaking for an hour, or, just tears. But there's none of this guttural screaming where it's conscious catharsis. that's where I take people back to the breath. Or tolerate some of it, but not to the point where they're traumatizing themselves or traumatizing other people if it's a group session.
Yeah.
But there's no, like, I don't push people. The way that I teach breath work and the way that I guide breath work is it's all about connecting that person with the divine through the breath. And we plant a seed breath. My guiding process is so simple. I say, start breathing. And then I watch them breathe after showing them how to do it. And then, of course, as a rebirther, we need to get them to let go of the out breath. And if they're having resistance, I get them to use the mouth. But there's always this spirit of gentleness overlaying the whole thing. There's never any, come on, breathe harder. Come on, let's get it out. Come on, none of this come on business or pushing. It's like conscious invitation. Like, okay, why don't you try breathing a little bit deeper? Or why don't you try breathing with the mouth? But usually I'll wait because usually they'll do it anyway. Like, people will do it. And if they make the decision to do it, it's so much better. So it's more the guiding is with deep reverence and a gentleness. But what happens and the releases that can happen with yin breath work or rebirthing, in my opinion, are actually deeper, because you're going into that unconscious, that shaking, that heavy internal catharsis release where the body just lets go and unwinds a whole lot of stuff. But a lot of people think that you can't get there without heavy mouth breathing, cathartic breath work, but you absolutely can. Some people, it's not their bag. They want the heavy stuff. They want the open mouth cathartic. But there's so many people. I feel like I'm like a net catching all the people who have been traumatized by the other styles in a way.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting comment, because I've come to understand that when we offer our own brand of medicine to the world, so you're combining, you're singing, you're using instruments, you've got the breath. To me, it's like if we've gone through our own healing journey with real dedication and commitment and consciousness, we get a sense of how to use these tools for us. But because the population in the world is so huge, chances are there's going to be other people like us who need to also have this very particular way that we're using the tools. And so I think, that's why it's so important to show up as a practitioner. I heard in one of your masterclasses where you were like, it's not about competition. You've got this really beautiful quote about the rising tide lifts all the boats that you use in one of your masterclasses. This idea that actually, if we're shining up and we're showing the particular spiritual events, then it just gives everybody an opportunity to say, "Oh, that's the one for me."
Yeah, totally. I don't want to I don't want to come across as knocking open mouth cathartic breath work, because some people, they love it and it is what they need. But for some people it's not. And it's like, I'm a very sensitive. And for me, I can't be in a room with people screaming, just get me out of there. But for some people, it's like people who listen to death metal and it relaxes them, I don't get it, but that doesn't mean it's wrong, right?
To be honest, I think that's why I needed it at the beginning, because my birth trauma had left me in a state of shutdown. So I needed that activation. I needed the activation to come back up to that restful place. When I went straight in with the very slow, restful breathing, I would literally just find myself. I would feel like I was in a place of such unpleasant self-hatred that I'd had to stop. So that activation kind of brought me out of the shutdown state, and then I was able to be soft and loving and gentle. But like you say, it's you find your own way through.
That's it.
I'm curious about the way that if we jump back to the sound healing, like I'm curious about how you've kind of brought all this together. Because when I attended your event, we obviously had a little bit of storytelling at the beginning, which I think is so important. So we were able to relate to this medicine that we were about to receive. And you shared that story about the negative voices sliding away, and you were able to make this phone call to this beautiful Venezuelan woman who became your wife, Rosarmi. And so we were like, oh, great, the sound healing's going to help take away all that negativity. What were the choices behind because you use instruments, you also use music that you play, you also use your own voice. So what's been the journey to find and discover all of these different forms of offering sound healing?
Well, it's always been vocal centric. I mean, actually at the sound healing that you were at, the only recording I used was a loop of the didge. Everything else was done live. So, it's to continue the story. When I met Rasadami and we got together in London, 2 weeks later, we decided to get married, right?
Yeah.
Of course, as you do. Because she was looking at my computer and I had a picture of this mountain, and the mountain's called Uritorco and it's in Argentina. And I had bought land when I was traveling next to Uritorco, the mountain. It's a very mystical place. It's like Sedona it's like the Sedona of Argentina. So we were together for 2 weeks, and then a few months after that, we left London and we moved to Argentina. And we moved to this eco village, and they had this sort of sound chamber. It was like an igloo. And I used to go in there every day just to practice toning, what Alexander had taught me. And I just started doing it for myself. And then one day I just said to the visitors at the eco village, I'm going to do a vocal sound healing. You want to come into the igloo? So I started just chanting over their bodies in the igloo, and they enjoyed it. I didn't have any instruments. I was so broke. I didn't have anything. And then someone bought some crystal bowls. So suddenly I could sing with a crystal bowl. I had an African drum, but that didn't work very well in that igloo. It was like bouncing all over the place. But I only had my voice in the beginning. So over the last 17 years, I've learned to play the Native American flute. I've learned how to play the didgeridoo. I've learned how to play the handpan. I learned all these instruments in my 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not supposed to be able to do that.
I know. I'm thinking back to all of those people who said that you were too old, and you know, it's just the most crushing thing, isn't it? Because I feel like just listening to you, I mean, you're just getting started. Not to say that you haven't already really nicely established yourself, but do you know what I mean? It's like, whoo, I'm just getting going.
I'm glad you said that, because I feel that way. Yeah, like because I mean, I get it. I get a lot of, and this is not said from ego, I get a lot of positive feedback about my sound healing. Like, there's not many people who, like, I don't have haters. I mean, touch wood. But a lot of people do see value in what I'm doing, and some of them are really blown away by the sounds that I produce. And this part of me just thinks, but I want to take this to the world, you know. I want millions of people to be able to experience this. But it's like, you know, I have something that really helps me a lot is that probably one of the most prominent kirtan artists in the world, Krishna Das. You know, kirtan, the mantra chanting. So Krishna Das didn't start as a kirtan artist until he was 48. And I just turned 49, and I'm 17 years in. He started when he was 48, and he got a Grammy in his 60s. All right? Just got to think about that. I mean, for me, I don't care if it's not, for me, it's not about getting a Grammy. I don't care if I get a Grammy. That's not that's not important. What's important to me is bringing light to the earth and for this to reach more people. And from that place, I feel like I'm just beginning. So I'm glad you see that.
Oh, you're welcome. Let's go back. You mentioned just super briefly. You were like, "Oh, I don't have any haters." And another thing that
that I know of, I should say that I know of. Yeah, I'm sure there's people who. I'm sure that I know there are people who don't like what I do. There's definitely people who.
But they don't feel moved. They're not moved to let you know or to troll you.
Correct.
And I think for me, this is kind of prodded another thing that I'm very fascinated in, which is when we choose to work as a practitioner, when we choose to offer our light or our love to the world, I feel that in order to answer that call, we've got to heal some specific wounds within us. You know, depending on your belief, these might be wounds from a past life. These might be wounds from the womb. They might be wounds from childhood. It seems to me that this call to be the one that we came here to be is so designed that we have to do the healing that's holding us back. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm curious to hear from you, Suntara, the sense that you get of the healing that you've had to do or that you're having to continue to do in order to show up and be love, be light in the world.
So it's an amazing question, Gabriella. It's an amazing question. And, you know, I haven't healed everything. Like, I teach breathwork. I'm an international sound healer. I still got loads of stuff. I still finish a sound healing sometimes thinking that was shit. I still got the negative voice, but that never goes away. It's just doing it in spite of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the thing. You're never going to be ready. Like, people listening to this, if you're postponing everything, you're never going to be ready. You are ready now. You have to, like, when I first started doing sound healing, I was rough as guts. Oh my God. Have you ever seen someone who's a scraper on the crystal bowl? I was a crystal bowl scraper. I'm a natural singer, but back then it was raw. In many ways, it was even more powerful when it was raw, and I was more sort of just. I was never afraid to be shit, though. You know, it's just not being afraid to be shit, and that's what I always tell people. I teach a vocal sound healer training, an 8-day training in Bali for people who want to be vocal sound healer. Think about this. Like, most people, like, they say that people fear public speaking more than they fear death. This is like, But what I'm doing is public improvised chanting with no plan. It's like, fuck. You know, so there's a lot, there's a lot of worthiness stuff, but you know, it's the long game. You know, every time over 17 years, I've been incrementally feeling more worthy. There's like, everyone wants the big bang. They want, this is going to sort out my shit. I'm going to clear all of my issues using this breath work or this plant medicine. And the stronger the medicine and the more it opens your mind, the more of a gap that's created between you and you, right? So I'm a big proponent of incremental change over time. Why do we have to get it all done in 5 minutes? Why are we in such a hurry to heal? Because when people are in a hurry to heal, they go and take too much medicine or too strong a medicine, or go and do tons of plant medicine and blow their minds. Blowing your mind and cracking your heart open is not necessarily a good thing. You know, what about just incremental change where it's incremental and subtle over time, where you become a incrementally better version of yourself over many, many years? You don't have to get it all done in this lifetime. So for me, being a sound healer and doing this journey with sound has been the healer. The greatest healer for me has been just to put myself out there. I mean, another example is, in 2016, I did a big sound healing in Sydney for 90 people at this beautiful venue called Mossman Art Gallery, and it was free. And it sold out in 2 days because it was free. And I said to my wife, oh, yeah, I'll never sell it out if people have to pay. And 2019, I sold out 2 nights in a row, paid. So the reason I tell that story is not to brag. The reason I tell that story is because in 2016, I was in the mindset no one would ever want to pay for my sound healing at this place. And 3 years later, 180 people paid to be there. So this is the evolution over time. Yeah. And I'm the first one to admit that I still have work to do on my self-esteem. I still have work to do on my triggers with my wife and my kids. I still have work to do on making myself small. I still have work to do with my abundance consciousness. I still have work to do with addiction. I still have work to do with so many things, but I'm getting better over time, and I'm not blowing my mind to do that. It's just patience, spirit of patience,
To me, I think the patience is such a huge piece, and it's kind of weird because the patience doesn't necessarily change or heal all of those individual things that you mentioned, but it finally gives you the ability to hold them where they're at. And that's kind of all they need, isn't it? They just need to be held rather than like, why are you doing this? You shouldn't be doing that. It's like, the moment that you're able to just hold them and go, it's okay, you can be here for a little while longer, then, ironically, they do start to shift. But I thank you so much for your honesty, because I think it's so easy to think that the people who are on the stage offering their medicine are like they're healed. And, I'm very much the same. Like, I'm always sharing, this is the next piece of personal work that I'm doing. This is the next trigger that I'm working on.
Yeah, and there's this whole thing about, like, so many people in this new age world talk about, I picked up bad energy, or I'm getting burnt out and all this. And like, I just believe in spiritual strength. Like every time I run a training, I become stronger. Every time I do a sound healing, I become stronger. And it's not depleting me. It's like, and my wife, for a start of me, she's such a badass. Like, she's like, how can you be tired? You're letting the divine flow through you, doing a sound healing for an hour and a half. You should just be full of love. You're not picking up other people's energy. She's just not. She's so damn spiritual, but she's just not like flower. Like, they call it mysticism, blaming outside sources for everything that happens to you, but really it's all within you, right? And you're to blame for everything, which is great because it's an empowering place to be. So, get out there, do your thing, run trainings, run events, be what you came here to be, and grow spiritual strength in the process. And you don't have to be perfect.
Oh, man. Well, if you're up for it, I think we definitely have to do a round 2, because I feel like we've just scratched the surface on so many things. I know in your membership community, you have a phrase, big love, and that's what I'm feeling for you right now, Suntara. Big love.
Same.
I want to give you, just before we close, I want to give you just a moment to reflect, because it might be that the things that you've been sharing with me, you've kind of, sometimes when you're retelling a story, you see it from a different perspective, or sometimes a question I've asked you has made you go, actually, I never really thought about it like that. So have any insights dropped in, or was there a question that I didn't ask you that you're just so dying to answer?
Yeah, I think I just want to say something to people out there. You know, when I started on this journey, I was $80,000 in debt with no job in Sydney, which is not a cheap place. And I didn't go and get a job. And we lived on the welfare. And we just had nothing for years. And I just never gave up. And my wife never gave up on me. You know,
Oh, yeah, I'm feeling it
that's the
too.
thing. You need to have people who believe in you. And she believed in me. She said to me once, if you get a real job, I'll be disappointed. That's what she said. I could not have done it without her. So you need people who support you, and you need to not give up. And no matter your financial situation, the money will turn up. I mean, I had to do side hustles for a while. I had to sort things out, but you just live. You live cheap so that you can follow your dream. And you get a cheap place to rent and a cheap car. We had a 2-door shitbox for so many years with twins, where we had to put them in from the front into the back because I couldn't only afford a $1,000 car in Australia. But I did that because I needed to follow my dream. So you just cut out all the rest of it and you keep going. And it's like the Chinese bamboo. The Chinese bamboo takes 7 years to put down its roots, and then it grows 20 feet in 60 days. This is what happens.
Yeah.
But you need to stay the course. You need to stay the course, even if you don't know what you're doing. Like this stuff I do with my voice, this unique thing I do with my voice, no one else is doing it really. How do you make a life out of that? But we did. We did it. And now we're thriving. We're thriving. We don't have debt anymore. We're super abundant. I make more money doing what I'm doing now than I ever did in IT per year. But that took a while. But it was worth the journey, because what else are you going to do? What else are you going to do? What sort of a life is doing what you don't want to do for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
I'd rather die. I would rather die than go back to the office. I can tell you. I would rather die. And when it becomes that, then you'll do it. And just another moment I had in 2015. We got so desperate for money that I started working as a cleaner. And I hate cleaning. Just ask my wife. And I was sitting in the car waiting to go to a cleaning job. And I was also doing network marketing because I thought that network marketing would save me so I could do music, but all it did was distract me. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with network marketing, but I'm a one-track guy. I can't do two things like that at once. And I found out that morning that this check that I was supposed to be getting from my network marketing company was not going to be coming because I made a mistake in my back office. And that was our rent and our food for the next 2 weeks. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And I bawled my eyes out in the car. I pulled myself together and I went inside to my boss. He was a lovely Irish man. And he said, go and clean that toilet. And I looked down at the toilet and it was so filthy. Other people's crap. Not something I enjoy. And I looked down at that toilet and I went, nah, I just can't do this. I'm out. So I went to my boss and I said, sorry, man, I can't do this. I'm out. Sorry to let you down. And I was crying so he could see that I was not going to do it. I went home to my wife and I said, fuck this. I'm going to do 108 sound healings in a year. I'm going to make this fucking work.
Yeah.
And she said, okay. Of course you are. So I did that. I did 108 sound healings in that year, and I did more the next year. And a lot of them I did for free. And the world opened up, and I went from getting 20 people on my events to getting over 100 people on my events. I learned how to sell my events using Facebook ads. We sold everything. We bought a four-wheel drive. We went on a tour with our kids, who were 7 at the time. Lived on the road for 27 months, going event to event. We called it the Trust Tour because we were making money from an event to get to the next event, and that was it. And we did that for 17 months in Australia, and we saved something ridiculous like $6,000 like, 4,000 pounds. And I went, yeah, let's go on a world tour now. So we went on a world tour with $6,000, including flights. And you just wouldn't believe. I mean, so many stories I could share with you about people opening their homes. We never paid for accommodation, hardly ever. We rarely even paid for food. Oh, we did. No, we did pay for food, but like people looked after us everywhere we went. And like money just came from everywhere. And there was times where money came from sources where I went, that's like, I got an email from the Australian government saying we owe you $3,000. And I said, no, you don't. I was like, that's a bunch of crap. But apparently they had underpaid us for the child subsidy back in the day. And they had, and that money came in, $3,000, just as we were like at the stage of, no, we got to go home. We ran out of money. Happened everywhere. And this is what happens when you just trust. And when you go on that journey and you throw caution to the wind and you jump off that cliff, you're going to be okay. I could tell you another 20 stories of us being broke and how it all worked out. Like, I'll just tell you another one. We're in Brazil when our babies were born in Brazil. We ended up, that's another story. We ended up in emergency C-section. They weren't expecting us, but all was well. And we had no money, and we were in Brazil. So I didn't even have a way to earn money except for playing music on the street in Brazil, which I did, and at restaurants. And then I cut a long story short because I know we're out of time, but my wife was 5 months pregnant, and the next day Carnival was coming to town, so there was no accommodation, and all the accommodation was triple what it usually was, and I couldn't afford it. So I was going to be on the street with my wife, 5 months pregnant, in Brazil. And that night, that afternoon, I was going around to places trying to find a place for us to stay, thinking, far out, we're going to be homeless in Brazil tomorrow. And I couldn't find a place for us to stay. This voice said to me, go home. It's done. It's like, what do you mean it's done? What do you mean? I got to sort this out. No, go home. It's done. So I went home. My wife was resting. I fell asleep. And then that night we were going into the city, which is an hour bus ride, Florianopolis, the city. And we were meeting up with this friend of a friend that we'd been trying to coordinate with for months. We met up with this girl called Claudia, and she picked us up in her car. Little did we know that her mother was coming with her. And her mother was, to this day, one of the most enlightened beings I've ever met. Just, she was a breatharian, just full of light. And they said to us, "Where are you staying?" We said, "As of tomorrow, we don't have anywhere to stay." So they took us in for a week and a half. And their youngest daughter was dating this guy, and he was a Brazilian federal judge. And we met this guy. He was a judge. He was the youngest Brazilian federal judge. And we were out having sushi with the family, and he was there. And he looked at our things, and he said, "Those 2 backpacks and that guitar and that drum, is that all you have? Plus the 2 babies in your wife's belly?" I said, "Yeah, that's all we have." And this guy you could see this change. And he went home to where he lived in another part of Brazil. He sold all his possessions. I kid you not. And he only kept what he could fit in his car, including, like, he had to wear a suit every day. So he kept 5 suits and he got rid of the rest of them. And he kept only what fit in his car because of us. And then the babies were born. Our twins were born in Brazil, and we still had no money. And he came up to me one day and he said, "I'm going to support you for the next 6 months financially so that you can relax and be with your kids."
Wow. I love it. You know, it's all of these stories, Suntara, and you know, where this whole bit started, where you were sharing about the belief and faith that your wife has had. It's trust, isn't it? When you, and also the reflection that I get is that when you're in alignment with what you came here in this lifetime to do, the opportunities, they can come to you because you're at your address. You're at the correct address. The parcels can be delivered. If you're not at your correct address, you just get that we couldn't deliver your parcel. So thank you so much for sharing those stories. I will definitely have to get you back.
Oh, there's plenty more.
I think there's plenty more for sure. But yeah, thank you so much for everything that you've shared today. I'm so thrilled that I got to experience your work in Bali, and that you agreed to reconnect. My intuition was right. I knew that I was going to enjoy chatting with you.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Thank you. Really enjoyed it as well.